Hi everyone. Chris from Divine Key, spelled QI, with your Divine Key spiritual chat, looking at my view. And this week or this episode, we are going to be talking about um, the veil, crossing the veil, thinning of the veil. It is the season of when what we call the veil is thinning, and will allow the interconnection between those in the spirit world and those in the human world. So I thought this would be it's fall where I am, the 1st of October, and it is going into the season that many of us consider the best time to make connection with those who have passed on. So the question is, can you talk to dead people? Can people who've passed on communicate with you? And the short answer is, I believe yes, they can. Now, this process is called mediumship. So this whole podcast is going to be talking about mediumship, what it is, my personal experiences with it, and hopefully give you some information if you're curious and want to explore it further. It gives you a launching pad to do that, hopefully. So, let's get into it. Can you talk to dead people? Well, I mean, I have had quite a few people in my life who've passed over. And I have, over the years, gone to mediums who specialize in bringing messages from those who have passed on over to us so that we can understand it. I've also been a part of a mediumship group where we gathered to practice mediumship. And through those experiences, I would say yes. My experience has been that you can communicate with those who have passed on. Now, this is just my personal experience. Um, Mileage may vary depending on who you are and who you've dealt with and talked to. I've been really fortunate to have been in contact with mediums who were quite good at bringing through the details that there was no doubt that they were connecting with the specific person that I was talking about or thinking about, that the communication was about. So, an example of mediumship um, that is more public would be people like John Edwards or Teresa Caputo, who is the Long Island medium. Tyler Henry, I think, is a Hollywood medium. Those people they have TV shows or they've appeared publicly. That is what I would consider platform mediumship. I mean, that's not the only thing they do. I'm sure they give private sessions, but they also do public um, sessions where they have a large audience and they receive messages. They relay those messages and they find out who in the audience connects with that message. And then they go more in detail from there. Now, caveat here, I've never been to a live platform mediumship show. I have only dealt with mediumships through one-on-one that I've hired or in the group that I was practicing within, where we did practice platform mediumship, but it's not the same as, being in an audience. I'm not an expert on this. It is not something that I do or advertise as part of my abilities or my business, it is, I believe, human nature to wonder how people who've passed on are doing. Is their spirit still there? Is everything okay? Even to just get closure in the sense of putting to rest arguments or a final expression of caring, any of those things. Um, those those things that you wish you could have said, or that you didn't get a chance to say. All those things are wrapped up in mediumship from the human perspective. So, so it's a big thing, you know, and it's becoming more popular, more mainstream. The more that you see uh, these public-facing events, so it could be YouTube or shows, or even shows like ghost hunting or paranormal things. They're all connecting across the veil. I want to put a huge warning, a caveat, right here at the beginning that says I'm expressing to you that if you're going to do anything with this, it's important to create a safe environment and to do it in, meaning create a sacred space, set up some energetic boundaries, vocalize how much connection you want with the spirit, be respectful of spirits that do communicate with you. Do not be afraid to stand in a position of power and tell the spirits that are connecting to stop, go away, or disconnect, whatever it is that needs to be told. You are in charge of your connection with whatever it is you're connecting to. You are always in charge of it as a human. Um, a lot of people go in thinking of it as a game, and it's not really a game. You really should take it serious, and you should realize that you are connecting to something that is sentient, um, whether it be source or a spirit that's crossed over, doesn't really matter. It's approached in the same way with respect and power. You do not have to allow anything that you don't want to allow. So I often, when I'm teaching, um, I will say it's like if someone's breaking into your house, you're not going to be like, oh, hey, can you please stop? You're going to be like, hey, get the heck out of my house. So that's the energy you want. You want to have a strong energy, and you want to know what it is that you want to allow and not allow in the connection. So again, we're talking about mediumship here. This is a little different than what I would consider psychic ability. When I think of and talk about psychic abilities, that to me, it can include mediumship, but it is a connection to a source. Often, you could call God or the universe, spirit, source, um, where mediumship is a subset of that, where you're connecting to an entity, a spirit, an energetic being um, who's crossed over. That was once human and is now spirit. Or, and I didn't know this until I started working in a mediumship group, it could be the energetic level of someone who is still in the physical world. So someone who's still alive, still physically here as a human being, but when you connect to them through mediumship, you're connecting to their spirit, their energetic signature. Um, and that I found fascinating when I experienced that through my mediumship, that and it's important in that case, which I don't know that a lot of mediums do this, but it's something I found useful is at the beginning when you connect to ask, are you in spirit or are you in physical? Or are you dead or are you alive? And they may, I guess, there's been cases where spirits don't know they're dead. Um, so I always say, are you in the physical or are you in the energetic spirit world? And that brings us to the point of what the season is, right? When I say crossing the veil is the division between the physical world that we live in and the spirit energetic world of ghosts and entities and spiritual connections. And um, when the veil thins, usually in the spring and the fall are the main times that we consider the veil being thin, is when you can cross over and make that connection. It's easier, it's not as dense to get through to the spirit world. And where I live, that would in the fall would be like September-ish, October, November into December, and maybe a little bit further into, even February. But definitely, with the holiday that we call Halloween and All Souls Day occurring in October and November, those are times when even certain religions have a belief that it is a time when we can connect to those that have passed on. Um, so, if you're interested in mediumship, then this is a time when you can get a group together and maybe start practicing it if you'd like to. And I would strongly suggest that if you do want to explore mediumship, that you do it as a group. So let's explore mediumship a little bit. My personal experience, we'll start with, I just went to medium. I had some loved ones who had passed on, and a friend of mine had said, I know a medium, so let's go talk to them. So we did. And my experience was that the medium knew things that they couldn't have known unless they were getting it directly from my person who had passed on, my loved one. And we're talking real specific. We're not talking about, like, for example, a platform medium like John Edwards or someone might be like, I'm receiving a name of a person that begins with J. And, someone in the audience is like, knows Aunt Jane passed away and is probably coming through. And they'll be like, I know someone who passed on. And they go from there, right? So they start with something pretty general, and then they might get more details. As I said, I've never been to a show, I don't know, but that's where they pull out things that could be common to more than one person. Um, when I went to see Medium for my own personal connections, um, the information that came through was very specific. One example is that the message that came through was an image of a graphic T-shirt, um, which I don't know is common or not, but I don't think is common. But it wasn't just that she described a graphic T-shirt, but she described the words and the exact images on this particular graphic T-shirt um, that my loved one was buried in, and it was interesting in the fact that it wasn't necessarily a common graphic that you would think of. I don't think so, at least. And it was not anything that I have publicly facing. In fact, I don't even know that I have anything privately facing. I don't know that I have a photograph of the actual shirt. So for it to come through, there's only one way, and that is that she was able to see that person wearing the shirt. Um, so that was one example. There were other examples that are also very personal and detailed that made sense to me one on one. I also had my own experiences of, when we ask, um, can you talk to the dead? Or are they sending us messages? Because I I feel strongly that my father visited me at his time of passing. It was early morning hours. Maybe I was dreaming it. Maybe I was asleep. Maybe I was awake. I don't know. It felt to me that an image of him appeared in my room to say goodbye to me, and that they loved me, that he loved me. And there was no doubt the image was my father. How it came to me, like I said, maybe it was a dream, maybe it wasn't. I certainly believe it was my father saying goodbye. And, when I woke up and talked to my family, I found he had passed that through the night that night. Um, and I also had another personal experience as part of my mediumship practice group. And it was interesting because it was unexpected. It wasn't when I was in the role of mediumship. It was actually before we even began the mediumship part of the night. We always started with meditation. And this particular evening, for some reason, probably because the energy was um, available and open to receiving. And it was interesting because I was taking this mediumship uh, practice. These it wasn't a class, but it was a group. We were meeting, and it was during this time of year in October, September, October time frame where the bell's thin. Um, and it was a group whose intention was to make connections. So I shouldn't have been surprised that even in a meditation related to that a connection was made. But during this initial intro meditation to get started for the night, I 100% felt my mother's energy come in. It was my mother, but it was so much bigger. I could see my mother, but it was so much more. It was source, like it felt like source energy to me. Like I connect to source when I work with my other tools. It felt so incredibly loving. I can't even express how moving it was for me to have this feeling wash over me, and to have my mother's essence as part of that was just so profound. Um, it still moves me when I allow that feeling to come in again. Um, there was no doubt in my mind it was my mother supporting me, showing up for me, um, telling me that she loved me, she was okay, and she was part of this bigger thing, this bigger essence. Um, was it like a ghost coming into the room and sitting down beside me? No, it wasn't like that. It was just a feeling of essence of my mother and a greater feeling of joy, bliss, amazing calm. Um, and it was just during an average guided meditation that was actually off the internet. Like it wasn't geared toward anything profound. It was just a basic meditation. So these things can happen when you set the allowance for it. Um, and I always, again, I want to say, I always set a sacred space. Even when I'm working in a group, I set my own personal sacred space and intentions before I enter the group. So before I arrive at a group setting where I'm working with other people, I set a personal level of clarity, intention, boundaries. I do all that for me personally before I actually even enter a group to work on anything spiritual. That would be my recommendation for anybody who wants to do this kind of work. So, when you connect with a spirit, my experience has been that, and that's through this mediumship practice that I was working on. When I work with my main tools, when I work with my usual tools, I connect to source. And I connect to source, I set the filter at source, and I ask that only for the good of all, the information can come through that's needed right now, so it's not overwhelming, and that we can use to have our best life. And I set that at source so that when the information comes in, I don't, as a human, have to discern what is okay to relay and what is not okay to relay. And I set that whether I'm pulling cards or reading for myself or a client. Mediumship is different because although I set boundaries, I set the boundary of I only want information. I don't want to have to experience what you experienced when you passed. I want information that is helpful for whoever is receiving it for their best life in the best way possible. I don't want to receive information that's going to be hurtful. I don't want to receive information that's going to be traumatic to either me or the person that I might be receiving information for. But with mediumship, I'm not dealing with just source. Like, I'm dealing with these entities, this energy, that this spirit that was once a human. And I have found that the traits of the human will often appear through the energetic connection. I'm not an expert. I don't know why this happens. My theory is that that's how we recognize the spirit as our loved one in this lifetime, is that they appear the way we know them or knew them to be. And that includes definitely personality traits. It is those quirks of the personality that make us go, yes, that is definitely my father, or that's definitely my mother. And sometimes those traits aren't the most useful or pleasant. Um, if your loved one was a trickster, someone who liked to play jokes or teased you a lot, that's the energy that's going to come through in a pure mediumship connection. Now, I have experienced mediumship connections through my work when I'm connected to source. That's a whole different thing. Like within the container of my source connection, within that conduit, um, energy of those who have passed on can show up and will show up with a specific message, a visual, or relaying of some detail that is significant either to me or the person I'm reading for. And more in confirmation than anything else. Um, I don't trust mediumship connections for anything that would be futuristic. I don't know whether or not they know what timeline they're in, whether we're in the same timeline, whether what they're seeing is where we're headed. I mean, as humans, we have free will, so we may or may not go down that timeline. In fact, I don't do future readings or predictions of any type in the other work I do. It is about unraveling and navigating what's going on currently and the past and looking toward the future on decision making, but not predicting. So, mediumship is a way to get closure, to get confirmation, to release energetic connections, to get the ability to have a chance to say maybe something you didn't get a chance to say, or to receive information that you wish you had related to the people that have passed on. Now, there's another layer of mediumship that I experienced as part of the group, and that is physical mediumship. And I want to bring this in so that you're aware. Um, and that is when the energy actually comes into the human body and almost transforms the host into the energy of the person who is communicating, the one who's passed on. So my experience with this was on the outside, watching someone who was in the middle of a physical mediumship, and their physical look changed. I don't know how. I don't know the mechanics of it. I can just say that they looked different. And their voice completely changed. Like a completely different voice came from their body. Um, they were bringing through a message for someone in the group, and it made complete sense. And that person who was in the group acknowledged who was coming through and acknowledged what they were saying and was able to have a conversation that they wanted that they didn't have before the person passed. And but here's the thing. I don't allow physical mediumship of my body because I don't know what would be too much for my physical human body to take. So there's no way I'm going to allow physical mediumship. I'm only going to allow any kind of mediumship to come through, preferably through source. That is my favorite way to receive mediumship. I did practice mediumship outside of the conduit of source when I was part of the group because I wanted to understand what it was, but it's not a way that I want to practice mediumship personally. So if you come to me, if I'm doing mediumship, it's through the conduit of source, and I'm receiving information that's needed, and closure that's needed, or information that you've asked about related to the person. Um, there was, I'm trying to think of a movie. There was a movie, I don't remember, but it, like you see in Hollywood and you see on TV, people talking to spirits a lot, like ghost hunters, paranormal shows, um, just different things. Just be aware that you are in control as a human being. You can tell them no. You can tell them to go away. You can tell them to stop. You can tell them to leave. Um, they do not have access to you as a human being unless you allow it. And that it's not all fun and games, right? Like, be respectful. Like, they're not going to want to be played with, um, toyed with, you know? I do understand that it's fascinating in so many ways, but it still requires respect. And um, have have an idea of what you're interested in accomplishing through doing this. And it's the beginning of this season. You have some time to go in and practice, to see what comes from it, see what messages they give you, see how it appears for you, and be well. Be well as you access realms beyond the physical realm that we're in. And I hope that if you do explore mediumship, that you find peace in that, that you find closure, that you find a sense of well-being in the knowledge that those who have passed on can relay back to us what's happening and how they are. Um, and don't forget to set your boundaries in a sacred space. So I'm going to wrap it up. Um, I hope that you enjoy these podcasts. If there are any topics you want me to cover, drop me a comment in any place that these show up, um, and I'll see what we can discover together. So this is Chris from Divine Key, spelled QI, signing off for now. Until next time, be well. Bye.